All right, guys, take a trip with me back on memory lane. 5 years ago today, the whole Robinhood, Gamestop, Wall Street bet situation with meme stocks going absolutely crazy, like Gamestop, and Robinhood, seemingly the exchange of the people, failed to meet its duty for people on that day. Now, today I'm going to go over a little bit of Vlad's retrospective on what happened that day, and in this blog, he talks a little bit about tokenization and how he thinks that could have prevented what happened that day and how it'll prevent anything like that from ever happening again in the future. Now, this video is less so about me giving you my opinion on like whether what happened that day was right, wrong, whatever. I'm more talking from the perspective of tokenization and why that actually does prevent what happened that day, in my opinion, from ever happening again. And I'll go through some examples, but let's jump in. The first part of the article is probably the most important. I'll kind of touch bits and pieces of it, but I want to read a little bit of it so you guys have some context. 5 years ago today, Robinhood and other brokers were forced to halt buying of several meme stocks, most memorably GameStop, in one of the strangest and most visible equity market failures in recent history. The underlying cause for the one-day pause was a set of complex clearinghouse risk management rules designed to mitigate the risk of the then 2-day long settlement period for U.S. stock trades. Now, real quick, I just want to pause there. That's 2-day settlement period for U.S. stock trades. In the world of crypto, 2 days is a long time. When we talk about settlement, when we talk about finality even, we're usually measuring in the numbers of, minutes, hours maybe. But, obviously, depending on which one you're actually talking about, that number can depend. But the idea that things take multiple days long to settle is not something that should be happening, I think, in today's world. Like 2 days long to settle something is way too long in the world of, real-time markets where we see, again, the stock market, especially, and I don't know if this was the event that really kicked it off, but the stock market nowadays is extremely volatile. It's gone are the days where people were saying, oh, crypto is too volatile for me, let me get into the stock market. The stock market is quite literally just as volatile as crypto. Look at gold, look at silver, look at the NASDAQ. The thing is that, the S&P, I think S&P hit $7,000 the other day. That's insane. Now, on that idea of 2-day settlement, Robinhood actually intensely advocated for that to be lowered, and they ended up being able to get it lowered to, 1-day settlement, which is T+1, as he mentions over here. Shout out to the SEC for doing what they could with that, I guess. But as I mentioned earlier, in a world with 24-hour news and cycles and real-time market reaction, settlement period of 1 day is still way too long, especially when you factor in weekends and Fridays, which I didn't even think about. On Fridays, it's 3 days, and on long weekends, it could be 4 days, right, if there's a holiday. So where tokenization helps in this case is solving that and making settlement real time. And this is kind of where he says it here. I'm not going to read kind of what tokenization is, because if you're watching this video, you probably know. And if you don't, then I could link to a video up here where we actually explain that already in another video. But they've already been testing this out, and they can see how it works. So for example, in Europe, Robinhood has made available more than 2,000 tokens representing US listed stocks. These tokens give European traders exposure to US equities, including dividends. In the coming months, we're planning to unlock 24/7 trading and DeFi access, which will allow investors to self-custody their stock tokens with possibilities for lending, staking, and more. Now, this is huge, guys. I think the most important thing, and I think the thing that we talk about the most when it comes to at least the average individual, right? If you're talking about, like, from my perspective or someone else's perspective, they want the ability to have exposure to these different companies, to these different assets, equities, etc. The EU now has this, but what the EU will end up getting now is the ability to, compound on their exposure to these different equities. Obviously, he mentions here DeFi, lending, staking, and more. That means that we're talking about like the traditional stuff that we talked about years ago, like taking ETH and depositing into a vault and getting a yield off it, or lending it out and withdrawing USDC in return. These are all things that, Vlad here is essentially kind of saying that could be possible, given that you make these stocks self-custody, of course, because as he does mention here, that they'll allow them to self-custody, which is insane. Right now, you can only buy and sell these stocks on their platform, so you can't really access it outside of that. But the idea is to make it available to everyone to use. And of course, he ends here with kind of alluding to the Clarity Act and, of course, the SEC hopefully being able to work together with all these different organizations and make proper guidelines for tokenization within the US. So just to kind of give you guys my final thoughts here on the idea of tokenization and kind of where this all fits in, I think it's really important to realize, and this guy's he's getting lambasted in the comments, by the way. So we're not gonna go over those. People are still very pissed about that 5 years later, understandably. To be honest, until clarity or anything similar to that passes, it'll very likely continue to evolve in different regions like the EU. This is going to be absolutely huge for the end user, for the end person. Exposure to these different assets will now be available to everyone across the entire planet. Because back then, when everyone was talking about investing into GameStop and all these different things, if you were not in the US, I don't know how you did it, to be honest with you. Maybe you weren't able to do it in general, right? Well, now you can do it in the EU and maybe even other different parts of the region where Robinhood has these stocks available. Market failures in the way that it happened are much less likely because things are settled instantly on chain. In this case right now, Robinhood is using Arbitrum 1 for these stock tokens. So every time you buy a stock and you sell a stock within the EU, you see it in the app, but it's actually happening on chain on Arbitrum. At some point, as they mentioned, they are launching their own Robinhood chain. So either way, to the end user, you're not going to notice that, right? For the crypto nerd like me, then you obviously want to know that because that's pretty cool. They have their own chain. But the point is that we won't need to rely on one party, one institution, one company to allow us to trade these things. They'll be fully on chain. They'll be permissionless. I can buy it, you can buy it, I can sell it, you can sell it, we can access it in DeFi, we can create new financial instruments with them. Like that is kind of the whole idea of what blockchain does. It makes things composable, permissionless, and available to anyone, anywhere. And that is the whole purpose of using blockchains. I think Vlad posting this, I give him credit. It takes a lot to kind of come back out and kind of rehash something that people I'm sure were already over. But I think it was an important time to do it because yes, while the people that were obviously impacted originally won't be that happy, it's good for them to understand why it should and will not ever happen again. And that, my friends, is the power of tokenization. I'm very excited for everything to be tokenized. What do you guys think? Are you excited for anything to be tokenized? Are you buying anything on the Robinhood app right now or any other tokenization platform? Let me know. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace out. Also, let me know if you like this kind of format for videos, not financial advice.